All right. Today we have Drew Petersen on the show. Drew, I'm excited to have you on to talk about all things mental health, running, your new documentary coming out in August, I believe. Is that right? Does it coincide with Leadville in August?
Yeah, it comes out August 17th, which is race day for Leadville. We're gonna publish it right when the shotgun goes off at 4 a.m.
Ooh, I like that. Like the early morning debut. Nice.
Yeah, it was when you put something out online, normally there's no rhyme or reason. You're just like, this is a random Tuesday, but you're like,
That
that'd
is
be
the nice
fun.
thing. Yeah, that's the nice thing about just publishing things online. It's like people, I feel like in the beginning, especially when you're starting out, people like look way too much into like, oh, what's like the perfect time to post something? It's just like, just get it out there. But yeah, so your documentary is called Feel It All. And tell me more about that. So I could describe it, but I feel like you would be you'd be better at doing that. So give me like the elevator pitch or the short version of that.
Totally. It's a ski film that's about running, and it's a running film that's about mental health.
Ooh,
It's anytime that you're trying to distill a story down into a shortened format, it's tough because putting it into a 34-minute film is tough, but
yeah.
really it's my personal mental health journey and how that's evolved over time with skiing and running, and we tell that through the lens of the Leadville 100. So we use the
That's
story arc
awesome.
of running the Leadville 100 and then sprinkle in anecdotes of skiing the peaks around the course, and then historical anecdotes of my life to tell my mental health journey. And all of this is with the mission of breaking down the stigma around mental health and suicide.
Nice. Well, that's a pretty good synopsis right there. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I remember was trying to watch Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows and seeing how they took that and pared it down into just 3 hours or whatever. So I imagine taking your entire life experience and trying to dial it down into a 30-minute documentary is also could also be a challenge. But I'm sure it all worked out. So I'm looking forward to watching it myself.
Thanks, man. Part of that too is just having really good people to work with. So my buddies Jesse and Tyler that I was working on this with, when there
Nice.
was like something that I was like, oh, like I really want this in the film, or like I feel like this should be in the film. Sometimes I'd just be like, yo, you guys need to make an objective decision. Like
Yeah.
I can't decide what goes in the story on this one.
I feel like that's a pretty hard thing about anything where you have to edit, whether that's writing or filmmaking. You're like, I love this part, but you need someone to make the decision for you because it's like too close to your heart in a way.
Exactly. But the more and more you do it, the better you get at kind of letting go.
Yeah. Yeah. So you grew up in Colorado, correct?
Yeah, I grew up in Silverthorne, Colorado, so
Okay.
right
Oh,
north of
wow.
Leadville. I'm 26 miles north of the start line
Right.
of the Leadville 100, so that's my hometown 100. And yeah, grew up skiing, running, and these mountains raised me.
So, so you grew up skiing and were also like a professional skier from a young age, right?
Yeah, yeah, I was pretty much the way I say it is I was born onto a pair of skis. I was skiing by the time I was 1.5, and then
Whoa.
I started. The first time I made money from skiing was when I was 15, and that kind of
Oh, wow.
blossomed and grew into a professional skiing career. And still skiing professionally now. So I've been skiing professionally
Oh,
basically
cool.
for half my life, and
Okay.
that's kind of like sometimes like that's what I think of as like my day job, and like in my world, like that's what people know me for. Um,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah, I
like
have to
it's fun
say
to.
oh, sorry. Yeah. I have to say I'm pretty removed from the skiing world. So literally have no like zero knowledge outside of growing up and knowing Peekaboo Street. That might be the extent of my skiing
Nice. I've
purview.
got a Peekaboo Street signature on a helmet from when I was like 6 years old.
Nice. Yeah, because I imagine growing up around there, that was like a big deal for sure.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome. And have you always been a runner as well, or is that something that came later in life?
Running's kind of like always been present in my life, but
Hmm.
really in like the last handful of years is when it became like a driving force and passion and direction in my life. But,
Gotcha.
you know, when I like look back historically, like there's all these times when it's like, huh, like running was right there, and like I just didn't choose that as top priority, you know,
Yeah.
through like childhood. Cause like even when I was a little kid, like I was like I would like run for fun, or I would run for training with soccer. And I sucked at soccer, but I was like the best at running at practice. And
Right.
like I like hid the first time I ran a half marathon from the soccer coaches because it was on the weekend in the middle of soccer
Oh,
tryouts. And I
right.
didn't want them to think I wasn't committed. And I was like running a half on the weekend. And yeah, I look back and there's all these different times, but like, uh, and then like in my adult life, it kind of like coincided with my passion for skiing too. Um, I had this really big injury in 2014 where I dislocated my hip, dislocated my shoulder, broke a few ribs, broke my sacrum, and
Wow.
partially tore my ACL all in one crash. And
What?
so that took like over a year to rehab from. And I remember like sitting on my deck and looking out at the mountains around here and just thinking to myself like I need something in my life other than skiing, and I need something in the
Yeah.
summer, and running was like there. And so
Yeah.
I was like I came up with kind of these like dreams and goals around running, and that helped me get through that rehab. And like in a lot of ways I think running was something that got me through um, you know, a lot of different periods of my life and a lot of different
Hmm.
struggles in my life, all the
Yeah.
way, you know, till this most recent chapter.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the, you mentioned some of the struggles you had, and that's kind of central to your life story, to your message, to the film that's coming out, and not and having those struggles, but also finding ways to come out of that, or uh, you know, recognize that, and then uh, find a better place mentally, whether that in a healthy way. So I'd love to dive into that. Um, for you, is that something that you've always remember being there, or is that something that came as a result of like a specific moment in life? Or how can you give me a little bit of background?
Yeah, totally. And it's kind of both. Like,
Okay.
uh, like when we think about like mental health, sometimes we want to like package it into a box, and like, you know, particularly like as individuals, we try to like
Hmm.
fit our like, you know, stories or struggles or like diagnoses into a box, but like that's not really how
Hmm.
life works. So it's like mental health struggles have been a constant in my life, like all the way back to when I was a little kid, but I just
Hmm.
didn't really have the language or the awareness or understanding, nor did um, society or my circle when I was a kid. So like the earliest memories that I have of suicidal thoughts are from when I was 9 years old.
Oh, really?
And like those are just the first memories I have. So I don't know how long that had been going on previously.
Hmm.
And it's fair to say like that there was depression and likely the symptoms of what I now know as type 2 bipolar disorder around
Mm.
all of that. And um so it's always been there. And then um like you ask if it's brought on by like a specific like chapter or like
Hmm.
happenstance in life. And for me, you know, both in a good and bad way, but a way that I'm grateful for. I had this near death accident in 2017.
Hmm.
It was a rock fall accident on
Oh,
Mount
wow.
Hood when I was ski mountaineering.
Whoa.
So long story short, basically, like when a mountain's warming up with solar radiation, um, the moisture that's like frozen like within rocks and cliffs can melt, and then rocks release and fall off of cliffs.
Oh,
um,
wow.
and so a rock fell on top of me while I was
No
ski
way.
mountaineering. And that was a radical experience. I made it out uh, relatively okay physically, but mentally, that sent me into a spiral of PTSD, and that's when my depressive and suicidal episodes got way worse.
Oh,
And
really?
in a lot of ways, like that, that is the most important turning point in my life, and I'm very
Yeah.
grateful for that experience because it made me face these mental health struggles that had kind of been happening in the background and that I'd been hiding my whole
Mm.
life, like really
So
come
up
to the
un
surface.
so up until that point, you know, you say you that came to the surface. How did you? What was it like before that? Like what? How was life or dealing with that, or what was the? Like, yeah, how? What was the situation before that happened?
Yeah, before that happened, I hid all of my struggles. I hid everything that was going on. I hid
Mm.
my depression. I hid my suicidal thoughts, and
Wow.
really tried to push away that reality and not admit to myself that it was real either. I really tried to exist on a level of experiencing only highs, and I was in
Uh,
denial of the lows of my life. So in a lot of ways, that was using skiing and running to maintain
yeah.
those highs, and then partying and drinking as well. And on
Mm.
top of all that was uh, trying to seek external validation and a lot of accomplishments, and like objectively, like I was crushing it in life. I did great academically through high school, college. I like you said, I've been skiing professionally for half my life, and
Mhm.
quite literally living the dream in that regard, getting paid to to travel the world and ski powder in front of cameras. So things are
Did you
pretty good.
almost? Did you almost feel guilty for having those thoughts, thinking, "Look, my life's amazing. This is so good. I have, you know, I'm a professional skier traveling the world, have awesome friends, family." I'm assuming you probably had good friends and family. Like, uh, why am I feeling like this?
Yeah, you get it. That's the dissonance that was going on. It's like, how can my life be so great, but still like be struggling in silence? And I think it's important to note too, like there's a real difference between guilt and shame.
Mm,
Guilt is I did something wrong, and shame is that I am wrong. And so I felt a lot of
uh,
shame for those
yeah,
suicidal thoughts. I was ashamed that I could experience depression or that I was thinking about killing myself when my life was seemingly so good. So
yeah,
that's and in some ways that's still a root of what I continue to work through in life is that shame.
yeah, yeah. Because it's almost. I feel like it's even hard to admit to some people. Almost like they wouldn't even take you seriously, like, because how could you see someone from the outside and and you're thinking, dude, no one's gonna believe me. Like this is uh like they're just gonna be like, oh, you're fine, man. Like just you have a great life. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
And I feel like
exactly.
that probably exacerbates it.
Yeah, it does because it like invalidates the experience in the eyes of others, and then it invalidates the experience in the eyes of myself too. And it's like when I look back historically too, like so much of my success coincides with the times when I was struggling the most too.
Oh wow.
Like, uh, I mean, like I remember like when I signed a professional contract with Solomon, uh, like how that was like living out my childhood dream, and all these
Yeah.
people like were congratulating me and like wanted to be a part of that success, and like simultaneously I was literally landing on magazine covers at that same point in time. And then like hidden from all of that is when I was spiraling into PTSD, and I was trying to basically like drink myself senseless. I was
Yeah.
blacking out every time that I drank, and I was thinking about killing myself every single day. And all
Wow.
of that happening at once exacerbated it all, and made it that much harder to navigate.
Yeah. So tell me, how did you end up finally recognizing, like, I need help?
Yeah, and it's cool because this actually, like, ties into the film, and it doesn't the full story doesn't make it into the film, and this
Mhm.
kind of, like, brings it full circle with my running too, is so that rockfall accident was May 10th, 2017, and for the next year, I really spiraled into those, depressive and suicidal episodes.
Mhm.
My life was just literally, like, crumbling around me. I was having all these different physical injuries that were, I believe, a result of the emotional trauma held in my
Sure,
physical body,
sure.
trying to find a place to a breaking point, really. So
Mhm.
I had tibial plateau fracture, dislocations of both shoulders, and then I was getting bilateral shoulder surgeries. And coming into the summer of 2018, so over a year after the rockfall accident, I finally got cleared to uh, to run and live without a shoulder sling on, and
Yeah.
that was in August of 2018, third weekend of August. And it's like the lamest way to get hurt as a professional athlete, but I tripped and fell
Nice.
trail running
Right.
here in Colorado, and I because I had just had shoulder surgeries, I like didn't put my arms out to catch myself, and then I ended up breaking my collarbone and I hit my
Why?
head
Oh
and
my
I got a
gosh.
minor concussion. And
Oh my
uh,
gosh.
like one of the like lesser talked about symptoms of concussion is a loss of emotional control, and
Whoa.
I was like it's very ironic because like head injuries are a pretty big part of like what has driven me to the depths I've been to. But like I'm
Mhm.
really grateful for that concussion because it made me finally like let down my guard, and I just like
Mm.
fully broke down that day. And that was the day that I asked my mom and my brother to hold me accountable to finding help, because at that point in
Wow.
my life I was at a decision point where I was either going to kill myself or I had to ask for help. And
Yeah.
that was like the like literal and metaphorical breaking point to actually asking for help. And what's
Mhm.
like when I say like that's interesting, like with running and with like the Leadville 100, is I say that's the third weekend of August because that was Leadville weekend of
Oh,
2018.
wow.
And it wasn't near the race, but it was here in Summit County, so stones throw away from Leadville.
Right.
Um, and that year, 2018, Rob Krar won, and he ran the
Mhm.
second fastest time in course history.
Yeah.
And that same weekend, um, Rob came out and talked publicly more than he ever had about his
That's
depression.
right. I remember that.
And
Yep.
yeah, like that was, I mean, a lot of people remember it because it was so
Yeah.
impactful. And
Mhm.
I remember him doing that and seeing like, if Rob can talk about these things and he can go run this record time, like then I
Yeah.
can ask for help and I can
Yeah.
follow through on going to therapy for
Dude,
the
that's
first time.
cool. That's awesome. I mean, just hearing that, I'm sure, like, yeah, I feel in the last, maybe 10 years, there's been more of a, I'd say not a push, but just more people feel more comfortable admitting, things are going on. There's more mental health problems. I feel like that's has been a good thing, especially coming out of the pandemic. But for him to do that and him, that's a pretty big step to take because that back then, even though it wasn't like that long ago, 6 years ago, it wasn't a hugely popular thing to do for someone that caliber of an athlete or success to come out and say that.
Totally. And especially for someone who's extremely successful and for a man who's seen as
Yeah, yeah,
the like epitome of strength and
yeah.
being like a hard dude. Like that
Right.
took a lot of courage. And what I think is like when I look back historically too at my experience, like the stories of other athletes were really instrumental in me feeling less alone, and Rob being right at the top of that list. But like when I look back to like I think that's where I find a lot of the belonging and like kinship within running and within
Mhm.
trail running, is that there is a much more open dialogue and conversation about
Yeah,
mental health,
yeah.
and with depth too, not just at a surface level. Like some of my other like big inspirations and people who I still look up to are in the running space, like Amelia Boone, Alexi
Mhm.
Pappas, Adam Campbell,
For sure.
and I owe a lot to them, and I owe a lot to running because like I feel like I belong, and I feel like it's
Yeah,
okay to like have this experience in this world.
yeah. I mean, dude, ultra runners in general, like you almost have to have something wrong with you to be to be in the sport. There's like it's just like take and I'm not saying that as a generalization, but I feel like more than some other sports, like ultra runners are like they can relate to each other a little bit more, because there's just something deeper inside of them, you know, which whatever way wherever they are on the spectrum.
Yeah, whatever
Um,
it is, whether it's a chemical imbalance in your brain or if it's just a really deep,
yeah,
like intrinsic motivation. Like there's
yeah,
more going on here.
yeah. So okay, so you talk about 2018 after that injury or your second injury, really, and then coming back and kind of finally getting help. So tell me, what did that look like from that point out? You know, the next few years or whatever, and just working through that.
Yeah, honestly, it looked pretty ugly. It
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of hard work, and I think that's like one of the gaps of when we're talking about mental health is like going to therapy and actually doing the inner work like is not
Mm-hmm.
a quick or an easy task. So yeah, really it was the next like 3 years of my life, but in a lot of ways it's still ongoing
Mm-hmm.
to do that work and dig all the way inside. And on the surface was PTSD. And as I healed that, and like going to therapy was also the first time that I ever gave a voice to the suicidal thoughts happening in my head for my whole
Yeah.
life. And
Yeah. I mean,
and
I'm sure that was pretty scary too, just to do that, because just admitting that, like, dude, I actually have these thoughts and saying that out loud to someone, that's got to be a big deal.
yeah, it was to go from hiding it constantly and
Yeah.
like trying to hide it from myself or like worrying that I'd get found out. Like
Hmm.
I told my therapist the first day, the first session. She asked me if I
Wow.
was having suicidal thoughts, and like I just finally said yes. And
Yeah.
it was like it was terrifying and it was really scary and I felt really weak and I felt broken, but it
Mhm.
was just such a relief. Like
Yeah.
I needed to finally say it out loud.
I mean, you've probably been shouldering that burden for, I mean, dude, your whole life. So just to actually like get that off had to be for sure a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. And like I have a lot of compassion for that version of myself and a lot of love
Hmm.
for that version of myself and a lot of pride too. Because
Yeah.
to be that broken down and that like
Yeah.
in that like terrible of a state, but to have that courage and strength, like because now
Hmm.
I very easily see how it's not weakness and to have that courage and strength to actually give voice to them for the first time, like
Yeah.
that's the real courage and strength that got me to where I am now.
Yeah. No, I mean, it really is incredible courage because, I mean, so many people, you know, I mean, that's why you see it so many times with celebrities and people who are, you know, after the fact, people are like, I never, and whether it's, you know, Anthony Bourdain, people look, the same idea, you know, Anthony Bourdain, Robin Williams, you look at these people's lives and you're like, how could anything be wrong? And then, but clearly, like, they had these demons, and, you know, these, not demons, but, you know, like intrusive thoughts or whatever is going on in their heads, and they just couldn't. And it's just horrible that, you know, these lives that are so incredible and beautiful and just contributes, you know, made such a difference in the world. And it's like it's just like they couldn't get the help that they needed, whether that was you know, just I don't, and you don't know why, you never really, will know why, but I mean, it takes a tremendous amount of courage to, yeah, to admit to that, I think.
Yeah, thanks, man. I
Yeah.
in the past few years of my life is um really only been talking about this stuff publicly for 3 years. And
Hmm.
in those 3 years, like I am continuously amazed by,
Hmm.
but I don't say it's incredible because it is very credible how many people struggle
Yeah.
to this degree.
Oh, for
It's
sure.
it's I had a conversation last week that like most likely every single human on this planet has a suicidal thought at some point in time.
Yeah,
And
I don't think
like
you're
if we
wrong.
could understand how normal that is, like
Yeah.
then we wouldn't be, you know, burdened by that shame that like silenced
Well,
me for so long.
well, I think especially now when you look at Instagram or all these other things, and you think, oh, look at all these people, like their lives are perfect. This is great, uh, and you think like, oh, if you have that thought or have these feelings or something, you're thinking like that. I don't know. It's just you feel like you should like everything should be fine or something, and I feel like to have that thought is almost like it's almost jarring in a way.
Yeah, it is. And it's scary. It's
Yeah,
like it's like, whoa, where did that come from? Or like,
yeah,
you know, when I was like really deep in it, when I was in a
hmm
suicidal episode, it was all consuming. And I was like terrified of what my own brain would do, whether it was conscious or not.
yeah. Did you feel that? Did you feel that it came on in like I think a lot of people when they think about suicide or depression, they think there's like this thing that happens and then you're depressed or like then have suicide. But I think a lot of people don't realize it's like slowly turning the water temperature up maybe, and that like it like kind of like the frog in the boiling water or whatever. Like it's not something that's you're just like, oh, I need help. Like I just like I'm different today. I need help. It's like something that gradually kind of seeps in. Have you felt? Do you feel like that way about yourself or about your experience?
Yeah, totally. And I still do.
hmm
You know,
Yeah.
like one of the like the big pieces of growth that I continue to work on is like learning to be more mindful and more aware of what my experience is so that I see those signs of depression coming in,
Mhm.
or I see those signs, whether it be like of a depressive or a manic or hybrid episode, to like learn how to manage my bipolar disorder better.
Mhm.
And even just like, you know, it's not like the first suicidal thought is what like brought me literally to a decision point. It
Right.
was you know, decades of suicidal thoughts, and then it was
Yeah.
uh like now it's like, how do I use my internal monologue in a healthy way to be
Mhm.
able to like be aware of if a thought enters my head like that and how I navigate it.
Yeah. Do you feel like there are times when maybe you'll notice yourself getting out of rhythm or, doing maybe what keeps you healthy? You notice, oh, maybe I'm not doing that as much. Maybe I'm leaning towards this other thing and but now you have the tools in place to be like, okay, like I can recognize that like the way I'm moving is not healthy. Like I can see, like right now it doesn't feel so bad, but if I keep going down this path, like I'm going to end up in a bad place.
Oh yeah, totally. And that's why this stuff's a lifelong journey and a lifelong practice of learning
Yeah.
how to navigate it. Is uh you know, I still struggle with most of these things. Um
hmm
I um I don't struggle to the degree that I used to, and I don't struggle to the degree that I used to with suicidal thoughts or thoughts of self harm.
hmm
But I will say, like, just in recent times, you know, in the past couple of years of my life, when I've been talking about this stuff publicly, like those episodes and those thoughts have still entered my mind,
Sure.
um, and even like right now, just like uh I've got a lot going on with this film. I got a lot, you know, I'm like
Yeah.
going into peak training for 100 miler. Like that's exhausting.
Yeah.
Not just
Yeah, dude.
physically. And I was having a conversation with a buddy last week where we were kind of laughing at like, yeah, like when you start to feel a little off, it's like, man, just get back to the basics. Like the foundation for me is
Mm,
sleep, and it's
mm.
like, all
Oh
right,
yeah.
sleep, social connection, like bam, like that fixed
Yeah.
most of the problems. But you got
Dude,
to get
that's a
better
big
at doing
one.
it early on.
Man, sleep is such a big one. I feel like even if I get, you know, an hour less of sleep than I should, it's like, like I'm so like my brain's like fried. I'm like, I hate everything. uh,
Yep.
yeah. I'm like, man, people need to, and I know it's like that is a big deal nowadays more than it was. Like, oh, like sleep health is so important, but I feel like it needs to be reiterated even more. Like it's such a big deal. Uh, yeah.
Yeah,
Anyways,
that's the like base foundation for me is like,
yeah,
and that's always the first thing I got to go back to if I'm feeling a little off. It's like, all right, let's start with sleep and then work
yeah,
on the rest of the toolkit from there.
for sure. Is schedule like having a schedule an important thing for you, or like a orderly kind of like a thing that how your day goes or week or whatever?
Yeah, totally. Like I said, I have type 2 bipolar disorder, and bipolar disorder, like one of the best ways to manage and kind of stabilize it is through routine, schedule, consistency. So it's huge for me, especially
So
like
can
when with the foundation being sleep, like having
mhm,
consistent like bed and wake times is like really
sure.
the like root of how I build that schedule.
I'm just thinking back of the days when you were partying and getting blackout drunk. I'm thinking how bad, like, how bad your sleep and schedule was. Like, dude.
Yeah,
Oh man.
and the stuff that I used to do, whether it be like running or skiing, like after a night of being blackout
Oh,
drunk
dude.
is ridiculous. I used to be able to go, on a 5-hour run in the mountains or uh like literally like in like one of the stories they tell is like doing a backflip off this like 50, 60 foot cliff like the morning after like blacking out at 1 a.m. and
That's
I don't know what
insane.
happened between that and, waking up and going to do that. So, yeah, it's
Dude.
ridiculous and like in hindsight like so stupid and embarrassing and unhealthy.
Yeah, for sure. In hindsight, it's crazy. At the time, you're like, I can do this, so I will.
Yeah, and also like in hindsight I understand that that was me trying to maintain living that
Yep.
high constantly
Hmm.
because largely rooted out of fear of what exists on the flip side of that, which is the lows.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, you gotta figure a way to balance it out the best you can, I guess, in that in that situation. Um, but yeah, man, like, how did you do, or maybe how do you think it would have went if COVID would have hit before you got help?
Man, it would have been very, very difficult. I had a lot of uh yeah, a lot of compassion for people during COVID because
Hmm.
it was a struggle for everyone. Um I'm not sure. Uh, honestly, the first time we showed this film was here in my hometown in Summit County, Colorado, and we did this showing at my old high school, um,
Hmm.
and showed the film. I gave this keynote talk and shared some of the stories of like being a kid growing up here, and I said in that like I'm not sure I would have survived a global pandemic
Yeah.
and like the realities of being a kid in this digital and social media age
Hmm.
if I had still been walking these halls in 2020. So
Hmm.
I I'm not
Well,
sure, but like what I will say is like the pandemic ended up being like a pretty huge opportunity for me
yeah.
and a big turning point because um I quit drinking, like, basically, like, 2 months before the pandemic really,
Oh
like,
wow.
shut everything down, which was, like, kind of an awful time to stop drinking and a great
Yeah,
time to
the
start
opposite of
stop
everyone
drinking,
else. Yeah.
and I'd been struggling and working on all this stuff, trying to get help for years prior to 2020, and, I think the difference was that in the pandemic, it felt like when I was at home working on myself and sitting on the couch rehabbing mentally and physically, the rest of the world wasn't racing past and forgetting about me. And that was like
Yeah.
the silver lining of the pandemic for me was like
Yeah.
everybody else stopped too.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and you were talking about the kids and stuff, and I just read I don't know if I read or watched a news article about when you debuted that film at your high school, and I think they said in that story that two kids that spring I think had committed suicide. And again, yeah, like a big deal, especially with the pandemic and the social media. I mean, there's a pretty direct line from all of that over the last 10 years, you know, in teen suicide and depression and anxiety and everything else. Um, and I mean, I've seen it with people in my own life, especially in the pandemic. Like, I mean, dude, personally, it was really hard for me. I was for sure drinking like way too much and picked up like other bad habits. I mean, I started, like, quit smoking like 10 years before that and then started just vaping again. And so, like, as a runner, I do the same kind of deal. You know, you're trying to do this job and you're hiding this other life that you have because you're like, I can't admit that I'm doing this type of thing. And that was actually sent me into kind of a, I mean, I was definitely depressed, like for sure. To some level. Like, and then it was kind of like spinning for me personally, the chaos of trying to hide that, of trying to like balance those two things, which was just drinking a lot like every day, and then trying to still run, trying to still have a family and be responsible. I feel like that definitely like, you know, peaked and I was like, dude, I have to make a change. So I did end up quitting like the vaping, and then which is insanely hard, but the same thing like you said, you, and I know it's, you know, it's different, a different thing, different struggles, different challenges, but admitting that to someone, which was my wife, and saying like, look, I need help. I can't do this, was like a game changer. And then, you know, I was able to, you know, finally give that up. And then, and the same thing with drinking, took a few different like 3 month breaks from it. And now it's, I still do, but it's, I very like much more rare. Like I don't drink at home anymore. So it's more just like it's a special occasion or going out. But I feel like the pandemic was like that was like, and that was a thing where I didn't even realize it at the time. It was just like, oh, everyone's drinking at the beginning of the pandemic, like every day. Let's just do this thing, have fun. And then, you know, it keeps dragging out and you're like, oh man, I'm like, the world's going crazy. Everyone's pissed at each other. I'm like, don't, you know, the whole, everything's disrupted. And I feel like I didn't realize it at the time. It's like 2 years in, I'm like, holy shit, like my life's a disaster. Anyways, but like, I know it's like not quite the same, but I can relate in some level, like to just the chaos of it all.
Yeah, it's the same in that you're human and that all
Mm-hmm.
of us go through periods of struggle. And I think the time of the pandemic, like for you, for me, for most people, epitomizes like how we'll revert to the coping mechanisms that we have or that we had in the past. And
Yeah.
like for you, it was easy to turn to nicotine, and
Mm-hmm.
for me it was really hard to not turn back to drinking. But like, I
Yeah.
mean,
I
I
can't even
was
imagine.
wildly depressed during that time of my life. And you know, like what I did revert back to was social isolation, like so
Mm,
many other people. But
sure.
when we're struggling, it's like the most difficult time period to build healthy outlets and to build healthy coping mechanisms and to build healthy structures to our lives. And
Yeah.
like, that's the that's the harsh reality of it, is like that's when we need it most. And that's
Yeah.
why we got to, you know, kind of build it ahead of time, or we got to go through those periods so that we can build ourselves up.
Yeah. What do you think the key is to that? Because I feel like in some ways I'm like, I felt like I had two paths I could take in that situation. It's like one just keeps getting worse, one I can change. And I'm like, why did I decide to like change, but other people, like, I don't think I did anything special. Do you know what I mean? It was just kind of like I got to that point. I was like, okay, I'm gonna like I have to do this. But why? Sometimes that drives me crazy because I can't. I don't understand why. I could, but some other people just like they want that, they want to, but they also can't do that. And I don't know. I just think about that. I feel like a lot of times, like, why did I deserve to to be able to make that decision?
Yeah. I mean, I hear like you had the deep intrinsic motivation for your family. Like you
Hmm.
had that
Yeah.
and you had your wife as like a as an anchor. But
Hmm.
for I think for most of us, it's like the harsh reality of these things is in the recovery community, and when we're talking about alcoholism, it's like the the reality is for somebody to get help, they have to want to get help and they have to be the one to follow through.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
like for as many resources as there are and as much community support as there can be, like really ultimately it comes down to us as individuals to follow through.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think even a podcast like this, like, say someone's listening to it and they are going through this stuff, it's like sometimes I'm like, not does it not matter, but I'm like, I feel like even personally when I would hear things, I'm like it's almost like you had to just like reach that point somehow. And I think all these are good contributions. Like, just hearing this, it's in that person's head, or so like hopefully they can like come back to it at some point. Which, so it's all like great to be getting out there, having these talks and everything. But I do feel like it's like sometimes you hear when you know someone commits suicide and they're like, oh, I wish like they knew, like, I wish they knew how much they matter, like how much we care about them. It's like, I feel like even if you do, it's like it's still, like you said, it has to be like that intrinsic thing. And that's like, I guess that's what drives me crazy, is like, how do you pinpoint that intrinsic thing that makes someone like decide, like, okay, like that rock bottom or whatever. It's like, I have to like now I have to change. And it's just, it drives me crazy how subjective it is from person to person. Like, there's no formula. It's just like you have to reach that point, whatever that point is in each individual person's life.
Yeah, it's the uniquely human experience. I
Hmm.
think about this saying though that's uh rock bottom can also just be when you stop digging.
Hmm.
You don't have
Oh,
to wait to get any deeper. You don't have to wait for things to get worse. Like
yeah.
now can be when you put the shovel down and
Yeah.
climb out of the hole.
Yeah.
Um, and I think too, like especially for people listening, or people who are like on that step where they're like, man, like I do need to change something. I do need help. Like the best thing that you can do is give a voice to it, and
Hmm.
that can start with journaling so that you're not alone with your thoughts. But
Yeah.
then and that's like what it feels like for me, like journaling feels like a way to not be alone with my thoughts. But then ultimately you do have to say it out loud verbally to another human
Hmm.
being. And the like it is so hard for people to believe who are struggling that they have
Yeah.
someone that they can talk to, but every
Right.
single human on this planet does. And every single human on this planet deserves somebody to talk to simply by being human. That's it. There's no
Hmm.
other qualifier necessary. And I guarantee that anybody who listening to this has a friend, a family member, anyone who
Hmm.
wants to listen.
Yeah.
And like if you're unsure about that, I guarantee that there are so many strangers when you walk down the street who would love to be that for you.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
it's hard for people to believe, but it is completely true.
And it is I mean, it's a scary thing, like, to admit that, you know, you need help or have a problem or whatever. But I feel like nobody's ever looked back a year from then and been like, oh, that was a terrible, like, I really hate that I admitted that. you know? Uh,
Yeah. Like trust in the good of humanity and trust that people see you as a strong human being. Like
yeah.
we're all desperate for connection.
Dude, and everybody roots for, like, anybody who ever is on a road to mental health recovery or, well-being, like, everyone's behind you, like, for sure. And if they aren't, then they actually need to work through whatever problems they're dealing with.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, how many times have you seen, like, hurt people is such a cliche, but it's so true. Like, pretty much anyone who, in my own life who is angry or just, has is in that kind of space, like they need the same help you do, or, that anyone does. They're just expressing it through a different way. And usually they do have, whether there's some sort of way they're trying to deal with it as well. And sometimes it's just being an asshole.
Well said. It's a projection.
Yeah. Anyways, but so yeah, that's awesome, man. Like, I'm excited to watch the film. But let me jump into a little bit more what the film's about. So, Leadville 100, that became a goal of yours. How did that kind of come out of this whole journey?
Yeah, it's kind of twofold. Is one, growing up right here, Leadville's the hometown 100. So,
Hmm.
like, even as a little kid, when Leadville weekend would roll around every summer, it's kind of like a holiday weekend. Always know that the race is going
Oh
on.
yeah,
And
nice.
so, like, even just like as a little kid, like I knew that this was something that I wanted to do at some point in my life. And then the second half of it is that when I was depressed and when I was suicidal, um, specifically in 2019, I was really at my worst. And when I was in the scariest suicidal episode of my life to that point, I
Mhm.
somehow came up with his goal. And I don't know how there was a neuron left in my brain to come up with it, but I'm so grateful it did. Is that
uh,
if I can make it through this, if I can survive to see tomorrow, then I can do absolutely anything. I can climb any mountain, I can run it. I can climb any mountain, I can ski any line, and I can run 100 miles. And running 100
Sick.
miles was the most tangible of the three, and that's what I locked into. And that literally became a lifeline to get me out of bed. It became a lifeline to be able to just make it through a night and trust that I would wake up in the next morning and have another shot. And
Yeah,
yeah, it got me through a lot of really dark times, and it
yeah,
was a was a really like instrumental tool to being able to make those decisions to keep going.
yeah. And so you had that goal in mind, and you start training for it. What was the year? What year specifically were you going for your first Leadville 100?
Yeah, the film centers around running the 2022 Leadville 100,
Okay,
and so that
gotcha.
was kind of the culmination of all of this.
Yeah, man. And like, so tell me about that day. I mean, this is, like you said, your hometown race. This is that dream that came out of one of the darkest parts of your own life. And you're like, speaking of the dark, you're starting in the dark. You're on the start line. Like, what are you feeling then?
Yeah, it's rich with metaphors, so it's why
Yeah.
it made for a good film. Uh, Man, it was, previously I said it's like kind of a culmination of all of this. I really felt like it was a celebration of all of this,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's like what I went into it feeling. That's what I went into it with the intention of, is make it a celebration of all of this, make it a celebration of the fact that I'm still alive, and
Mhm.
a celebration of the version of me that was strong enough to make it through those times, a celebration of those around me, the community that I've built, of Leadville, of the
Yeah.
of the meaning and direction that Leadville, that running 100 miles, that the mountains around Leadville, that the like Sawatch Range and the Colorado Rockies have held for me. Um,
Yeah.
Felt like it was a celebration of all of that, and um, it certainly ended up being that. Uh, it was a lot to experience, I think, um,
Mhm.
to also layer on that we were making this film. I was definitely feeling a lot of that too going into the race.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that helped take your mind off a little bit. You're like thinking about the filming aspects.
Kind of, but then like the best part is like as soon as the shotgun goes off, like my job's just to run.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's awesome.
So how was the maybe I don't want to spoil the film or anything, but like how was the overall day for you? Well, day slash night.
Yeah, man. I ran 300s to this point, and that one, just as much as any other time running 100, uh,
Hmm.
was the fullest, most vibrant expression of life itself. It had the full
Yeah.
spectrum of human
Yeah.
experience and pain and joy and just complete immersion. Um,
Yeah.
and you know, anybody who's like learning to run hundreds, like, will say, like, it's real hard to execute well
Yeah.
on
Uh-huh.
race day, and I gotta tell you, I fucked up that race the exact perfect amount and the exact perfect way to make this film, and it was so funny because I was out there, I was like, "Man, like, I put so much effort into training for this and into making this film, and, like, I'm, like, messing up on race day," and then, towards the end of the race, I'm like, "Man, I messed up for, like, the perfect story arc to tell this whole thing." So, like,
That's
I
awesome.
nailed
Yeah,
it.
in a way, you don't want to have a perfect race day when you're filming something. There's no drama if you have a great race.
No, and it's like that's why it's boring to watch elites run,
Yeah,
a
right.
perfect Western states. Like, "Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm
You
with you
nailed
there.
all your time splits. Good
Yeah,
job."
yeah, yeah, exactly as we expected you would. Yeah, I love that. And you said this in I think an interview where you were talking about how, like in life, there's gonna be great moments, and then there's gonna be bad moments, and then there's gonna be more great moments. There's never. It's not a linear thing. There's like you don't know when they're gonna come or when it's gonna happen, but there's gonna be like these high points that could be low point the next day, maybe a year from now. And I feel like 100 miler is like a perfect like metaphor for that. Like it very like plays out the same way.
Exactly, man. It's the saying in the ultra world that running 100 miles is like living life in a day. And I
Hmm.
think that's very true in a lot of ways. There's the highs and lows, and there's all these through lines, and there's the need to keep going to see what's around the next corner and to change
Yeah,
your situation. But then
yeah,
the one disagreement that I have with that saying that it's like living life in a day is that there's no finish line because
yeah, yeah.
like for me and like in the film we intentionally don't end it at the finish line is there's no finish line
I
for
like
the
that.
reality of living life as a human being, and there's no finish line
Yeah,
when it comes to mental health, mental illness, mental wellness, and
hmm,
like you just take all those lessons from those 100 miles and apply them to the next hopefully
yeah,
hundreds of thousands of miles.
yeah. So, are you running Leadville again this year?
Yeah.
Or are you Oh, sick. Okay, nice. I wasn't sure if you were running it again. That's awesome. Nice.
Yeah, I'm psyched, man. I was just running. I did my long run yesterday out on the course, and it got me so
Nice.
excited to be back in it and be back with uh what Ken Clover calls the Leadville family. Be
Mhm,
back
yeah,
around that community and yeah, make it another celebration.
that's awesome. I'm sure the race has changed a lot since you were growing up as a kid. I'm sure the entire vibe is, like, way bigger now.
Oh, it's crazy, man. It's
Yeah.
it's cool though, like it's cool though to like have a connection with the race for like my entire lifetime because like this will be
Mhm.
the 41st anniversary of the race,
Right.
and like I just turned 30, so like I haven't even been
Yeah.
alive for the whole history of this race, but like to see it evolve is really pretty neat. And it's
Yeah,
so
that's
neat too
awesome.
to see how the town of Leadville has evolved. Like we
Yeah,
we there's the nickname of Lead Vegas. Like there's so much happening there now,
that's
and
crazy.
like it's cool to see what like Ken Clower and a lot of people around the race will always talk about like the purpose of starting this race was to really save that town, and like
Yeah.
It's cool,
Like
like,
actually
over my
happening.
lifetime to see what it's actually done to, like,
Yeah.
make that town a thriving
That's
community.
awesome. That's one of the places I haven't been there yet, so hopefully that's someday I'll get to check it out because I've always wanted to for sure.
It's pretty
But
cool.
nice, that's awesome. All right, well, let's wrap this up because I know you got some places to be, probably doing some more cool stuff, like not as cool as this, but probably pretty close. Uh, but I really appreciate you coming on the show. So can you run down everything for our listeners one more time when the film drops? Anything else? Anything else? Whether it's I see you're wearing your hat. So if you want to give that a shout out as well, where people can pick that up, go for it.
Yeah, thanks, man. All of this stuff is kind of leading up to releasing the film online on August 17th on race day. We're publishing it for free on YouTube when Ken Klober, the legendary race founder of the Leadville 100, shoots the shotgun at
Nice.
the race start, 4 a.m. Mountain Time. So that's when everybody will be able to see it online, and we're going to use the race and everything around it to bring a bunch of attention, because the goal of all this is to get the message and the impact and the mission of the film out there. And then in the 2 weeks leading up to the race, we got 6 different events screening the film, and some of these are theater screenings, some of them are group runs, and those are in Ketchum, Idaho, Golden, Colorado, Boulder, Colorado, Basalt, Colorado, Denver, and Leadville right before the race.
Nice.
And then that is like, I keep saying is like, it's just the beginning of this, but
Yeah.
like all of this is gonna keep growing, and I'm honestly just trying to get out of my own way so that the impact and the mission of helping people can really happen. So after the race too, there's going to be a ton more events and a ton more screenings. Like there's already 20 plus events
Oh, nice.
locked in with the film afterwards. So those
Cool.
are going to be more of these like theater screenings in mountain towns combined with me giving a keynote talk. And it's also on the Quality Ski Time Film Tour all fall. That's 15 different locations across North America. So we're really hitting it from all angles. It's submitted to 26 different film festivals so far, and so that's going to get it to a lot more places. Really just trying to get it all over the place. And the way that you can stay up on those events is follow me on Instagram at Drew Peter Ski, or go to my website, drew-petersen.com/feelitall. And that's got the full event calendar on there. It's got the film trailer. It's got all this info. And then also on the website, you gave me the permission to plug it.
Yeah, go for it.
We've got these hats that we're selling too. These hats are to support the film and this mission, both financially and in spirit. And for those that are audio only, it says, "I give a fuck about mental health," and the U is a hot pink heart.
There you
And
go.
I'm making these to spread the message and open conversation. Like the best feedback that I've been getting from people is that when they're wearing these hats, it's an amazing conversation starter. People want to talk to them about mental health. And I think that's so cool, because I want to bring
That's
this
awesome.
conversation out of the dark shadows and bring it front and center. And I made these hats because we're always talking about mental health awareness whenever we're doing any of this advocacy work. But that like kind of becomes a trope because people say it so often. So if you look up the definition of awareness, like the first definition is like, something exists. Like, yeah, that's obvious. But the second definition is that something exists and you're motivated and engaged to learn about it and do something about it. And the way I interpret that is that you give a fuck. So that's what it means to give a fuck about mental health.
I love it. That's awesome, dude. And we'll put those links in the description of the podcast episode or on YouTube, so you can check that out. All right, Drew, thanks so much for coming on. It's a great conversation. I'm excited for everything that's happening. Good luck at Leadville. Hopefully I'll run into you somewhere sometime out there on the trails.
Yeah, great to meet you. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, hope we get to share some miles sometime.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, man. I'll talk to you later.